All right. So now we're into the form. This is the form that we originally wanted to fill out, but we needed to get all this extra information put together before we could do this. So as with most state forms, this thing is extremely confusing. You really need to read it carefully because it's pretty easy to get some of these answers wrong. So section 1, and again, I gave you cheat sheets on this in your instructions for doing your homework. I did give you some guidance on this, but let's go over it because I think it's super important you understand this form, because your project could be a little different from my project and you want to be able to fill it out correctly. So first things first, it's put in sections, section 1, section 1A, and so on. So section 1, is the proposed activity limited to repair or replacement of out of water components of a boardwalk? Obviously, we're not doing anything with a boardwalk. I have built a boardwalk bridge in the past, but in this case, we're doing a culvert, so the answer is no. Does the project consist of maintenance, repair, replacement of an existing legal trail or pathway where there'll be no change in location, configuration, dimensions, or construction type, and no work done in standing or flowing water? Answer is yes. It's only a maintenance project. Section 1A. If this project involves only a boardwalk, check NA and continue to section 1B. So since we're not building a boardwalk, we can't click this thing, not applicable. Just leave it blank. Okay, so now we're on 1AA. Does the project include wetland crossings that impact more than 3,000 square feet, have a trail width of greater than 20 feet, have a fill width that has not been minimized and or exceeds 50 feet per crossing, or exceeds 60 feet in length per crossing? So what this is telling you is you can cross a wetland, but it can't be more than 3,000 square feet. And in our world, you won't even be able to get even close to 3,000 square feet because the maximum distance is 60 feet along the trail times the width of the trail, which is 15 feet. So the most we'll be able to impact is 900 square feet. So this is where these DES rules don't make a hell of a lot of sense for us, because, if we could have 3,000 square feet, it would mean that we could cross 200 linear feet of wetlands. And that would be awesome, but they don't let us do that. We can only cross 60 feet in length. So the most we're ever going to be able to impact is 900 square feet. I want to stop here and make sure, does everybody understand what I just went over? This is super important. Okay, no question.
Larry, question for you.
Yeah.
So if we were going through an area of wetlands, does that open up a whole new can of worms as far as, paperwork and obviously things that we have to follow? Or is that basically saying we could, obviously that means if it does, we'd have to put a bridge or some sort of structure in, right?
Okay, so ideally, the number one thing, and I'm talking about ATV trails now, because snowmobile trails can go through wet areas because they freeze in the winter. But let's just talk ATV trails. The number one rule is try not to cross through any wet areas at all. The second best thing is if you're crossing over a stream, some sort of a small waterway, then use a culvert or use a bridge to go over that. Now, I like to use culverts because that allows me to drive dump trucks down the trail and bring new gravel in. Bridges, we build all our bridges to take a fully loaded triaxle dump truck. So 50 tons or 100,000 pounds. But let's say I happened to have a trail crossing that I had to go build an ATV trail, and it had to go through a wetland, and it was more than 60 feet. So what I did to get through that wetland is I used a fabric called a honeycomb fabric. Basically, it looks just like a bee's nest, or where they store honey. The honeycombs themselves were about 6 inches in circumference, 6 inches wide. So they were basically 6-sided honeycombs all connected together, and you laid out this fabric, and then you filled it with 3/4 inch stone. And what that does is it creates a base for your trail. The water can still flow through the stone or underneath the stone, but you can build a trail on top of that. The next step was to put geotech fabric on top of the stone, and then we put 6 inches of gravel followed by 6 inches of clay gravel. And I was able to build a 120-foot long section of trail through a wet area and, drive dump trucks over it. So, but I couldn't use this permit. I had to file what's called a dredge and fill permit, which is about 50 or 60 pages long. It requires hiring a wetland scientist. An engineer was involved. There was a lot of stuff. It wasn't an easy process. It took about 4 months. But on this particular permit, if your wetland is less than 60 feet in length, then you can cross through it. You can fill it and you can cross through it. So when you file this permit, you're going to want to take pictures of it, and you're going to want to put it on your map, and you want to tell them what the length of it is. And, you want to make it known up front that you are going to be filling in this wetland area. And you want to note it on the map, but it is allowed, providing you meet these conditions. So I know it was a little long-winded, but did that answer your question?
Yeah. I just figured, obviously, crossing through wetlands, even if it's under 60 feet, kind of goes against the whole best management practices anyways. But I was just curious, if they give you leeway, obviously that means you can do something. So
Yeah, and there's times when you just can't get around it, so it's good that you've got this option available. So
we've got this situation at Sullivan County right now, so this is good to know, Larry. Thank you so much.
Okay, well,
I think we'll fall just barely under the 60 feet.
as long as you do that, you're good to go. You can file it under this permit.
Okay.
And then if you're interested in learning about that fabric or stuff that we did, I'll be happy to provide you the information, after the class. Okay. So if you look at the bottom here, it says if this project does not include a wetland crossing, click not applicable. Okay. So in my case, I didn't click that because I do have a crossing. It's really a culvert crossing, but I have a crossing. So the next question is 1AB is Does the project impact a bog, marsh, sand dune, tidal wetlands, cedar swamp, or undisturbed tidal zone? And the answer is no for my project and for pretty much any projects that you guys are going to be doing. They're not going to allow you to go across any of these things. Okay. So, you know, a small little wetland crossing, that's one thing. If you're trying to cross a bog, not a good thing. A bog is usually multiple feet thick and it's usually a very sensitive area. So you don't want to be anywhere near that. Okay, next question, number C. Does the project jeopardize the continued existence of a protected species or habitat? And the person responsible for the SPN project has not obtained recommendations from NHB or Fish and Game. So, I mean, dumb way to ask this question, in my opinion. They ask it in reverse. In this case, no, it is not jeopardizing it. And we did obtain an NHB report. So again, it's tricky, but you know, you can see what they're getting at. D, is the project located within or adjacent to a prime wetland or duly established 100-foot buffer and no waiver was obtained? Answer is no. I can tell you prime wetlands, you ain't going to get permission to go anywhere near those things. So if you hear the words prime wetlands, you don't want to be anywhere near it. E, if the project proposes culvert installations crossing a perennial or intermittent stream, do the streams crossed have a scoured channel over 8 feet wide or the installations meet bridge criteria? Okay. So the answer is no, we're not going over an 8-foot wide stream. I can tell you from past experience that you're not going to be able to put in culverts pretty much anything over 3 or 4 feet. Even 3 or 4 feet is pushing it. You know, once you get into that range, you're going to have to be dealing with a bridge. I believe the absolute maximum for a culvert is 5 feet. So I don't know where this 8-foot wide comes from, but it's you're not going to put a culvert into an 8-foot wide stream, that's for sure. Okay, if the project does not propose culvert installations crossing a perennial stream or intermittent stream, check NA and then continue. So obviously I am putting in a culvert, so I can't check NA. So that we now can move to number F. Okay, does the project include the installation of a new bridge or replacement of an existing bridge? Okay. First of all, I'm not doing a bridge, so the answer is automatically no. But let's talk about bridges. Let's make believe we were putting in a bridge. Okay, the first part of this, where work will be performed in the water or in a wetland, or fill will be placed in the water or wetland. I can guarantee you if you answer yes to that, you're going to be in trouble. You can't do it. So you don't want to answer yes to that question. Impacts to the banks or water course, including bridge structural supports, will exceed 3,000 square feet per crossing. So the impacts to the banks are going to impact more than 3,000 square feet. So the rule of thumb is if you're doing a bridge, it's got to be bank to bank, meaning not the bottom of the bank, the top of the bank. You've got to be on dry land on the top of the bank on both sides of the river. So what that really means is you want your bridge supports, let's say you're using cement blocks. I usually like to place my cement blocks back away from the edge of the riverbank at least a foot, but if I can, I like to go 2 feet away from there. So that if the riverbank decides it's gonna scour itself down, my cement blocks aren't gonna end up in the river. So when you go to build a bridge, allow some extra room on either side away, so you're backing away from that bank by a couple of feet. It's not going to cost you that much more to build that bridge if it's 4 foot longer. So just, keep that in mind. Don't push it to the limits. Okay. Bridges in a prime wetland or duly established 100-foot buffer and no waiver was obtained. The answer is no, we're not building in a prime wetland. Bridges in a bog, marsh, sand dune, floodplain wetland. Again, those are all areas you don't want to be in. Answer no. The project site has been identified by NHB, that's our data check program, as having occurrences of protected species, habitat, and the person responsible for the project has not obtained recommendations from NHB or Fish and Game regarding the protected species or habitat. So again, this is a whole other reason to run this NHB report as soon as possible. Find out if there are any impacts, and if there are, what are the recommendations from Fish and Game and NHB. So in our case, we ran through the data check. It was a clean data check. So the answer to that question is no. Okay, so on section E, do we have any questions on section E? Okay, great. Now, check this one out. If you answered yes to any of the sections in any of the questions in section 1A above, you cannot use this form. Okay, so let's scroll back and take a look. And all the answers in 1A are no. Okay, but very important. This is how they get you to put in, a dredge and fill permit application, which, like I said, if you ever want to see one, I'll be happy to show it to you, but it's all of 50 to 60 pages and about several weeks of work. Let's just put it that way. Okay, we're on to G. Will the trail or pathway project use existing structures and pathways wherever practicable? The answer is yes. For trails, is it complying with the best management practices for trail construction and trail maintenance? And the answer is yes. And we are going to take a quick look at BMPs here in a minute or so. Okay. If you answered no to question G, you cannot use this form and must file a standard dredge and fill permit application. All right. If you answered yes, then go to section 1B. So here we are at 1B. And if the project does not involve a boardwalk, check not applicable and continue to section 2. So we get away with an easy answer in 1B. It's not a boardwalk, so we are going to section 2. Section 2 is our project description, okay? And so again, I've given you a sample here. Rebuild 2 sections of existing pitway OHRV trail called Snowmobile Trail Corridor 19A by removing rocks from the trail surface, clearing existing ditches where needed. Replace existing 24-inch by 20-foot failed culvert across trail. Resurface rebuild sections of trail with compacted clay gravel. Place hay bales in disturbed ditches and to mitigate short-term erosion. Seed ditch lines with conservation mix to mitigate long-term erosion. CMAP for the location of the trail sections to be rebuilt and the location of the culvert to be replaced. So that is a really complete description, and I guarantee you DES would give me an A if they were grading me on that. Most of the people who put descriptions in would stop after rebuild 2 sections of trail. But I've had my forms sent back to me asking for a more complete description, so I learned my lesson and I give them a very complete description now. Okay, and then underneath that, we have section 3, which is really the location of your trail project. So you got your town, your tax map and lot number, which we looked up before using Granite View. You've got your organization name, your organization address, your organization city, state, and zip. Then you've got to put in your property owner information. In this case, it's on state of New Hampshire property. And then this is where our other stuff comes in. So section 6, attachments, we have to attach a copy of our NHB data check form, and we need to put the number in here, 231055. And then the USGS survey map we created in Granite View, we've got to attach that. And then we got to give them a $25 check payable to the treasurer, state of New Hampshire. So they want you to check these boxes off to make sure you include this stuff. And then section 7 is where you have to initial, saying that, you know, pretty much your project is not located in a prime wetland. You're following all the recommendations of NHB and Fish and Game. You're aware of the limits of the SPN, those limits that we spoke about in terms of square footage and distance and all that, and you're going to adhere to them. You're testing that this information is true, complete, and not misleading. And you also understand that if you do put in misleading information, they can deny or revoke this application. And then what you got to do is you have to sign down here as the applicant. That's the middle signature line here. And then you've got to get your landowner to sign on the top line here. The agent doesn't really apply in this case. So that's one thing they changed with these forms. I used to be able to just sign this and basically give a copy to the landowner. That ain't good enough anymore. They want the landowner to sign it as well. And then they've got information down here on all these questions, pretty much what I just went over with you. So at this point, do we have any questions on the DES form?
If the trail is going to breach over different property owners' property, do you have to fill out a new form for each property owner?
So generally what I do in that case is I will do a separate form for each owner and do a separate NHB report for each section of trail. So if I've got 2 or 3 different owners, I'll do, you know, a separate NHB report for each of them. So the answer is yes.
Larry,
Yep, go ahead.
If you do a separate NHP for each landowner, is it $25 per application or is it for the project?
So if you're going to do a separate NHB report, then what you're going to have to do is file a separate DES report for each landowner. So yes, it would be $25 per landowner. And it could be $50 per landowner if your NHB report fails the data check and you've got to send in $25 to find out what the failure is. So it could be $50 per landowner. And oh, by the way, you can't file for that $50 on your grant application. That's something that the club has to eat. Any other questions? Okay.